So, good morning everyone. Thank you for coming to the first plenary lecture. My name is Petr Varbanov. I will be chairing the session. Our invited plenary speaker is Dr. Stella Tsani. She's from National and Complutensian University of Athens in Greece. She is an associate professor at the Department of Economics in the university, with expertise in energy and national resource economics, bringing the economic perspective to our distinguished conference. And all this is within the context of sustainable development. Dr. Tsani brings her expertise to a host of international organizations. I will just mention a few, like United Nations IPCC, UNESCO, then European Energy Agency, World Bank. There are many others. It's just a host of them. Then Dr. Tsani will talk to us about the governing sustainability transitions. Would you like to come, please?
Thank you very much. Well, good morning. It's a true honor to be here with you today. Thank you very much for the invitations, to the organizers. I've been in many conferences, but I think this is the place for me because it truly brings together what I advocate for: interdisciplinarity and multidisciplinarity in shared challenges. So honored and extremely happy to be here with you. When I was preparing this presentation, I was thinking that, okay, what to deliver to very small people in the room, that many of them, if not all of them, are engaged at the very high level of scientific debate and policy making and practitioner science interface. And the answer is, to be honest, not much. I cannot offer new knowledge to you or beyond state of the art. We are all experts in this room, and many of you, if not all of you, are doing top-notch work in your disciplines and your fields. So keeping that in mind, that it's a room full of really interesting minds and really interesting works to go through and to read. What I will try to deliver in the next half an hour, 40 minutes, is this very concrete notion from my work that you cannot address a problem, a systems problem, by looking only at one segment of this system. So this is the main contribution or the main message that I would like you to take away with you once leaving this room. Of course, saying that does not mean that we should not be capable and good enough and strong enough in understanding the particularities and the granularities of this problem. So it's very important to have experts and experience that looks at the tiny details, at the nitty-gritty details that need to be addressed and understood in order to solve the greater issue. But in the end of the day, researchers and especially the younger generation of researchers and those to come, it seems that it's quite important to develop this system approach to solving issues. Not necessarily looking at the system as a whole, but understanding that the particular questions and problems that they are trying to solve with their work is trying to improve or to contribute to a system transformation that we are undergoing now. Of course, I will tackle this discussion from an economics perspective. That is my discipline and background. But being lucky enough to work with natural scientists, with engineers, with different disciplines, I came to realize, and I also deliver this to you, that it's quite important to understand the language of other people in the table and in the room. So this is the key message, and this is just an introduction of where this key message comes from. That is me in front of the main building of the University of Athens. We have a long name, National and Kapodistrian University of Athens, but the short is University of Athens. Is the largest and most prestigious university in Greece, one of the oldest in Europe. Of course, I'm happy about all this, but what I'm most happy about is the fact that I belong to a department that is very open and very supportive to international collaborations and to promoting scientific insights and contribution to top-level policy making and business analysis. What I do at my department, I run a Center of Excellence on Resilience, Economics and Sustainable Transitions. What we are doing is we are partnering with the United Nations and the International Science Council program on international risk and disaster resilience. So basically what we do, we contribute with economics and social sciences perspectives to what is called disaster management resilience and also sustainability resilience. So a lot of our work looks exactly at how do we prepare for the day after and how do we support this transition from one system to another system without or considering, not without having any side effects, but considering the social and economic implications of this transformation. I also lead a network, Generation Youth Energy Network, that basically what it's trying to do is to bring in the room the voices of young researchers, of students and even pupils, and their contribution to debates about the energy transition in Europe and beyond. And this is a European award-winning initiative, of which we are very, very proud, because what we are trying to do is basically to bring in the room the voices of those that are most impacted from what we call now energy transition and decarbonization pathways in Europe. As I mentioned, my university has been quite supportive and quite encouraging in combining the scientific work that we do at the Department of Economics with international initiatives at the highest level of science policy interface. So we contribute to IPCC work, we contribute to the EPES work, we contribute to the European Commission's actions that have to do with just transition, with decarbonization pathways, and scenarios of clean energy transformation. And of course, in this work, the discussion with other high-level academic institutions and networks like the Global Young Academy, like the Inter-Academy Partnership, like the Young Academy of Europe, support us and help us to bring in this dialogue and in this action young researchers that through these networks and through their institutions are trying to engage but also to form the next wave of research that is targeting sustainability transition. Now, you know this tiny planet is where we all live, and actually this is one of my inspirations. The way that this planet works and the fact that everything is interconnected in this natural system is what has been driving my work as an economist as well. The question is, for me as an economist, like why in a system that everything is interconnected and nothing is really wasted, how can we operate a human-centric system, a market-based system that produces many byproducts and produces many negative implications and effects for third parties? So something is not right in the way that we are managing our actions and activities, and most importantly, the resources that come from this system that seem to be available to societies for free, but without which we would not be able to survive. How do we know this? We know this by the understanding of what we call planetary boundaries. So what we have is very critical planetary functions that, if are not left to work as they would and as they should, we would reach a tipping point. Now, the image that I include here to describe this tipping point, so basically the point without return, is not the right one. The graphic shows the planet that goes at the point without return, but the reality is that we know that this system adapts very well and can continue to exist without us. So the tipping point for me is not for the planet, it's rather for humans living on this planet. So when we're talking about natural resource management and planetary boundaries, we need to think what are the human impacts on the planetary systems, and what does it mean going beyond these boundaries for humans, for societies and the economies we live in. We have this assessment from the scientific community. I use here a title from one of my favorite rock bands, is AC/DC. The song goes like this, like Highway to Health. So I think this is a very good description of what we see here. 9 planetary boundaries, assessment of those, and how we see we have crossed them and we continue crossing them in a very short time period. So this very much relates to the debate about climate change and the planetary boundaries. You know, there are voices out there that say that climate change does not exist. It's something that the planet has experienced for many instances before, so why worry? True. We've seen these ups and downs in temperature, we've seen changes over time, and there is a scientific evidence supporting that, but what we see here for the first time is the speed, and how the speed of these changes connects to economic activities and human activities. When we talk about human activities, as an economist, I would relate these activities pretty much to the way that we use in modern societies to manage what we produce, how we produce it, and who consumes what we produce. And the recent approach, the modern approach, has been market-based mechanisms. So we say that we have demand-supply interactions, people are trying to do the best they can for themselves, and through an invisible hand that brings equilibrium to these supply and demand factors, we end up with an equilibrium price. A price that can describe pretty well the costs and the benefits of whatever is produced and whatever is consumed out there. So this would be like 1-minute introduction to basic economic principles that economic students are taught in their first year. Unfortunately, what we don't detail enough in that first year of economics lectures, and what we don't discuss in enough detail when we talk about the superiority of the market-based system, is that this system has failed in large to incorporate externalities, to incorporate information asymmetries that are out there, to incorporate power imbalances that we see in this system of production and consumption. So when we have enough information of what is the cost of producing something and what is the benefit from consuming whatever is produced, fine, people can make well-informed decisions. But what happens when the cost of productions are not fully incorporated in the final market price? When you have, for instance, environmental externalities, or where you have environmental degradation, or temperature rise as a result of human activities and emissions of CO2. Now, all these things that in economics we call externalities seem to drive a lot the image that we are faced with today. So we see environmental degradation, we see impact on the environment and on the environmental systems that are necessary for human survival, but we haven't incorporated them at a sufficient detail in the market signals and the market prices and in the market mechanisms that we see as of today. So, understanding the problem, the next thing is finding a solution to the problem. And the solution is, first of all, make sure that the prices that we have out there are clear and transparent enough and incorporate all the costs and the benefits. And the second, name this as a system transition that calls for sustainability. Now, sustainability has many different definitions. I'm not sure whether there is a common agreement, but generally we can say that let's manage what we have in a way that the future generations will also have access to the same resources, or at least to achieving the same level of welfare in the future as we have today. It seems that this sustainability notion and concept is something new in the discussions. It's not, and it's not definitely in the scientific world. More than 2 centuries, 3 centuries almost, we have documented reference to sustainability as a concept and also as a target. And what may be different today from the past is that in the past the sustainability notion has been addressed from a specific sector or specific natural resources perspective. That could be, for instance, the management of forests, it could be the management of depletable natural resources like oil, or it could be simply the management of agricultural land and agricultural production and how that would be enough to feed rising numbers and figures of population. And at sectoral level or at individual level, humanity has been quite successful in addressing this sustainability target or concern. And it has been mainly through technological innovation. So through technologies, we have managed to keep up with rising food demand, with rising demand for energy resources, etc. But now, what makes the sustainability concept and the seeking of this sustainability concept implementation is that for the first time we are not talking about sustainability at individual sectoral levels or part of the economies or parts of the world, but we are talking about sustainability at the global level and at the systems level. So how do we manage, how do we connect economic systems, natural environment systems, social systems, technological systems in a way that preserves what we have today in terms of welfare for future generations as well. Also, what is new in the modern sustainability discussion is that, contrary to what has happened in the past, we now have a very active science policy interface and dialogue that is trying to translate scientific findings into concrete policy recommendations. Well, the scientific community does not do exactly that, so we don't recommend what has to be done, but what we do is we do an assessment, a thorough assessment of what we know and what is scientifically documented out there, and we deliver this to policymakers so they can make well-informed decisions. So in a way now we are in a stage where the scientific community contributes to understanding these externalities that the market system has failed to incorporate and to show the real picture to policymakers that in the end of the day make laws and legislations that have to be implemented. Now, the side effects of this, or the immediate effects, not just side, is that in the end of the day, it's business entities and producers that have to implement these policy directives that target production side. That is one side. The other side is consumers. So people, real people that see the costs of policies and initiatives in their everyday lives and in the decisions that they make on how to consume, what to consume, how to allocate their incomes, etc. So this creates a pressure for policymakers, a pressure from the business side that is trying to understand how these policy directives and how these environmentally driven and climate change driven targets can be translated into simple business actions that do not deliver only costs. I want to pay attention to this part of my intervention because I have this privilege of discussing very much with business representatives and the business community. And what they seem to be frustrated with a lot is that, especially in the European context, is that all these environmental policies and climate action brings an excess burden, financial burden on them, so they are asked to transform, to adapt to new regulations, to implement these regulations, but they don't have a clear understanding yet of how this translates to financial returns and economic returns for their entities. So it's our responsibility to discuss with them and to make them realize the bigger picture. And this is part of my work that I show you in a bit. So to wrap up this slide, what I'm trying to deliver here is that for the first time, probably the sustainability concept connects with concrete policy interventions that bring real level changes at the business and consumption part of the society. And to make this more specific, we have several science policy interface actions, whether it's IPCC, whether it's IPES, whether it's the United Nations Environment Programme, that are trying to deliver the state of the environmental conditions and human-driven changes on the natural environment, but also to connect these to business implications. In the last global environmental outlook, in which I had the honor of contributing. What we did is we tried to translate exactly these environmental changes into figures, into financial numbers and impacts that businesses can understand and policymakers can understand. And one of the key messages that was also used as a title, as a dissemination title for the outlook, was that if we don't act now, the costs that we have to bear are much larger in the future than the cost of action. And basically what we find and what we show through modeling and through the scientific knowledge assessment is that we can save trillions if we act now. Okay, so in a way we show that there is also a business case to discuss all these things and to look for sustainability. Similarly, IPES is doing exactly this in the most recent reports. It's trying to introduce business perspectives and business language into the concepts of biodiversity and environmental protection. So if you see earlier assessments, a lot of them have to do with the state of the environment. Natural scientists and colleagues from natural sciences disciplines are trying to deliver the state and the knowledge on the state of the environment to policymakers and to business entities. But very recently, this language has also changed. So now we see reports that are targeting specifically businesses and business entities and trying to deliver to them the key message that, you know, whatever you are losing here in terms of the biodiversity or ecosystem services is translated directly into financial and economic losses for your actions. Okay. And to make this even stronger, I include here a slide from consultancies that shows basically what is the ESG impact and drive in the financial markets globally. And this is just to give a visual answer to those that are questioning to what extent the sustainability transition is something beyond policy initiatives. And the answer is quite clear, and it doesn't really matter whether Trump is on or is leading now or someone else, because what we see is that the financial markets see also a business case here and see also a good investment alternative. Basically, trillions of money are being put in ESG-driven investments and business solutions. So that tells us that idle capital that stands out there and sees the technological developments and the business developments at the global scale has understood quite well what are the risks of not acting. So sustainability transition appears not just as a good to-do thing, but as a risk management strategy. And this is something that the scientific community has also to understand well. So this is the general image and the general understanding and the definition of what is sustainability and how this has shaped the interaction between society, policymakers, and business entities. Now let me bring a bit in this discussion the scientific debate and my own contribution. When I started my research career, I was very much interested into natural resources and what is called in the literature as the resource curse. So the question is, why countries that are abundant in natural resources underperform in terms of economic development when compared to resource-poor countries. And this is a very challenging question that, for me, drove me into a path that was looking not just as natural resources as an input to production, but as something that connects directly with governance issues. So when I started my research, what I did, I was trying to connect natural resource abundance with institutional quality in resource-rich countries. And one of the main findings of this work was that actually resources are not the problem. The problem is institutions and governance that underpin resource management. So it doesn't really matter how much nature gives you. What it matters is what do you do with what nature gives you. And it seems that the traditional scientific literature in this domain has not done enough to understand what is the interrelationship between natural resources, institutions, and economic development. So keeping this as a first theme of my research that connects basically the system approach to sustainability transition, what I try to do is to look at the links between natural resources and development, not directly, but indirectly, through institutions. One of the key findings, again, I repeat, was that resources by themselves are not the problem. The problem is governance. How do you govern them? And to make it even more specific, what I did, I looked at resource funds. Maybe you've heard about oil funds or diamond funds in Botswana, for instance. So financial instruments that are trying to manage resources, revenues, financial revenues coming from the management of depletable natural resources. So basically what did I do? I connected financial tools and financial approaches to the macroeconomic management of revenues coming from natural resources with economic and institutional outcomes in the specific countries. And what I found in this work is that when we talk about financial instruments, of course we have to look at how they are developed, how they are governed, what level of transparency they have. But in the end of the day, in order to make a meaningful contribution to this stream of resource scarce literature or to the stream of development economics, so basically to support developing nations that are rich in natural resources, one has to go beyond the assessment of the financial instruments, but it has to look at how these financial instruments connect to economic outcomes, to fiscal policies, to fiscal tools, and to macroeconomic developments of the countries. So one of the key results of this work was that indeed governance matters a lot, and indeed we need to look at the connections between different systems. So the financial systems, financial tools, and how these financial systems and tools interact with fiscal policies and development outcomes in these countries. And this was one of the notions and one of the outcomes in my work that indicated for the first time that, you know, if you want to make a meaningful change and contribution, you have to look at how things that maybe in the literature seem not so connected are connected in the end. Okay. Now, again in the same stream of work that has to do with natural resource management, I looked at energy policies. And the literature traditionally addresses energy policies in isolation. So it's all about transition that we see in the energy system, it's all about technological innovation and energy production and consumption, but there is little discussion on how energy policies may be gendered policies and how they may be fiscal instruments that determine gender outcomes in the labor markets. So what we did with my team was to look at harmful subsidies, something that is, let's say, a hot topic right now in international discussions and in the different COPs about, you know, whether we should remove harmful subsidies or not. So subsidies that promote the consumption of coal and hydrocarbons, oil and gas. So I tried to look at this question, but not from an energy sector's perspective, so whether this can contribute to accelerating decarbonization or not, but to look at this removal from a gender labor market outcome. So the question was whether we have here tools or approaches that beyond the energy system and the energy sector itself seem to impact other macroeconomic and labor markets outcomes in particular. And indeed, from our research and our empirical work, what we found is that subsidies are not just energy policies, but they are governance policies with gendered implications. So what we found is that the persistence of energy subsidies is associated with lower female rate participation, lower rates of female participation in the labor markets. And we explain this in our work, employing theoretical perspectives from feminist economics, from time allocation perspectives, from household management and time allocation and income allocation decisions. So this was another work that showed that you cannot talk about transition in the energy market, or you cannot talk about a removal or changes in energy regulations without considering other macroeconomic or even specific gender-specific implications of these changes. Now, in the same stream, another work of ours is looking at water management and water as an input to production. and water as a natural resource that is subject to sustainable management and use. So what we did in this work was to look at the European Water Framework Directive that is discussed in the literature as a prime example of a holistic approach to water management. And we try to compare this to sustainable development targets. So the key idea in this work, in this paper, was that, okay, we have here a policy tool that seems quite well developed and quite holistic in approach, but how well does it perform when we compare this to international initiatives that the European Union is also engaged and committed to? And we compared the Water Framework Directive to United Nations Sustainable Development Targets and the Agenda to 2030. And basically what we found is that despite being a very good approach, policy-driven approach to integrated water management, it still lacks the understanding of how water connects to different SDGs and what kind of improvements can be made in this Water Framework Directive to address not just water targets in the European Union, but also sustainable development targets in the European Union and beyond. So basically the main idea in this paper was that when you are looking at the management of specific resource, you need to consider also the wider sustainability implications of this management. Otherwise, what we have as a common target there, that is sustainability transition, is not met. Now, of course, saying that, we do understand and we do realize in this work that this is quite a challenging and complex task. And this is where, for the first time, we say that it doesn't really matter just to have the technological innovations in place to meet sustainable water management, but you also need the social scientist expertise in order to connect this water management target to wider social and economic targets. Now, beyond governance and natural resources, another large theme that I have worked with has to do with energy transition and economic transformation. So when I started working in this stream of research, it was all about modeling of the energy system. It was about discussing the different technologies, the technological details of the different energy forms and production alternatives, and how the introduction of these alternatives changes the power mix and the cost of electricity production. But quite early in this research came to my realization and understanding this idea that when we talk about energy transition, we don't talk about just technological transformation, but we talk about a completely reshaping of the economic system, of the labor markets, of institutions, and of course the geopolitical relationships that are evidenced out there. And this discussion started 15 years ago, and still to this date, and now more than ever, I think, in the last 15 years, we see how energy transition shapes geopolitical relationships. Let me make this more concrete. First of all, the traditional approach to energy transition has been that we move from old technologies to new technologies. So we replace coal with renewables, or we give up internal combustion engines for electric vehicles, and that's it. Once we do that, we decarbonize the system and we are happy ever after. But this is not the case. And actually, if you see the energy transition progress at the global level and at the European level, it's quite easy to identify that at technology level, we have done lots of progress. For instance, if you look at the World Economic Forum Energy Transition Index, you see that most of the countries, even the top performers, like the Nordic countries, have covered 2/3 of this so-called energy transition. But what remains ahead of that is the most difficult part, and that has to do with behavioral changes and societal changes. So this tells us that technology is not the issue. What is the issue in completing this energy transition and transformation of the system is the understanding of how new technologies, how technological transformation in the energy system connects to social outcomes, to labor markets outcomes, to acceptance parameters for the end users and end consumers. And this is where we are now. So we have a very good understanding of technologies, we have a very good deployment of marketable technologies that make for a business case, but we are still struggling at European level and global level with institutions, with labor market transitions, with behavioral aspects of this decarbonization. Now, when we talk about decarbonization, one of the most important aspects of this technological innovation has to do with who develops the next wave of innovation and who benefits from it. I was lucky enough to work in a team of researchers that were providing alternative scenarios to the European Commission with regards to decarbonization alternatives in Europe and whether Europe would benefit from this decarbonization process. And all our scenarios and all our assessment delivered the same consistent result, that Europe benefits from decarbonization if it goes first. It benefits from learning by doing and from gaining a larger market share in these new market conditions. But that has to do with the speed of this decarbonization and the governance of these decarbonization efforts at the global level. So it's not just the technological innovation that happens within the European Union, is how do you market it, how do you capitalize on that decarbonization at the global level. So whether you gain the benefits of moving first and you establish yourself at the global level. And actually this was one of the main recommendations back then, 15 years ago, that Europe has economic reasons to move first, but it has to make sure that this technological innovation and the first movement in technological innovation comes with equally first movements in the regional and global governance of the energy transition. So, in a sense, what we said is that decarbonization should not be just an energy policy in Europe, but should be an industrial policy in Europe. 15 years later, what we see is that Europe has been quite strong in innovating, but probably it was not that good or that fast in reactions in transforming this into a coherent and applicable industrial policy in the European Union. Now, of course, we can discuss all the different reasons why this has not happened at the necessary speed, but I think it's beyond the focus of this conference. Also, although very, very interesting for my discipline. From what I want to say from this stream of the literature is that while we have been discussing for decarbonization pathways and technological innovation, this research showed that it's not just technologies, it's not just industries, it's also how this transformation at the industry level connects to the competitiveness level of the economies. So it doesn't really matter as a scientist to understand how technological sectors transform, but how this transformation connects to the wider socio-economic development of the region or of the countries, because that is what is going to determine winners and losers in this battle. So it was yet another recognition that in order to make meaningful contributions, you should not look just at the industry level or technology level that we are studying, but to connect this to the wider economic and social targets that countries have. Now, again, labor markets, this is also core to my research, because in the end of the day, people want to have jobs and want to make ends meet and to deliver just food and shelter for their families, as simple as that. So any impact that has to do with labor markets should be very well understood by researchers. Now, this low carbon transition, of course, it addresses technological transformation, but it also comes with implications for the labor markets, demand for new skills, demand for adaptability in changing situations, new occupations, even shifts in investment patterns. And these shifts do not always happen in the same regions. For instance, we have seen that in the European Union in the last 15-20 years. So we have a shift in investment patterns. We're moving from conventional energy sources to renewable energy sources. But these investments do not always translate to capital transfers within sectors in the European Union. Sometimes they relate to investment reallocation from Europe to other parts of the world. And that has dire and immediate implications for labor markets in Europe. So whoever is working in this decarbonization field, it also needs to understand how decarbonization relates to social outcomes and particularly labor market outcomes, because this is what at the end of the day supports acceptance within the European Union and beyond of the new policies. And we experience it right now in Europe quite fiercely, that people are tired and not entirely convinced that the high cost of decarbonization that they seem and they understand to be paying, because they are losing jobs, they are facing higher energy costs, is really paying off. Okay, so it's also part of the scientific community and duty to deliver the message and to make these people understand what is the true cost and benefit of decarbonization. Now, about geopolitics and governance, I will not refer too much into this, because it's something that we read every day in the news and we live it as it is. When you have winners and losers, you also have actions. And actions usually that may come from the loser's side. So what do countries do and regions do to keep a grip on their international stand? And here, again, our work showed that when we're talking about decarbonization and innovation, it's not just a technological transformation or industrial transformation, there's also a shift in global powers and in geopolitics. So Middle East is no longer what it used to be in terms of leading the energy discussions at global level or leading the energy prices. But having said that, what we show also is that if we want to understand the speed and the success of energy transition, we also need to look at what these conventional energy producers are doing. So put it simple, the message here is that if you want to understand whether energy transition is something that convincingly delivers, you should also look at what Saudi Arabia and Saudi Aramco are doing. If they are also putting money into renewable energy technologies, then yes, indeed, we have a business case that is convincing also the developing part of the world. A second thing that is quite important with regards to geopolitics is that we need to understand where demand for energy is coming from. We do a lot of things in Europe and in the developed part of the world to decarbonize, but frankly speaking, we've done our bit in becoming more efficient, in reducing energy consumption, in adapting new technologies. Now it's on the rest of the world, and especially on the developing part of the world, the responsibility, let's say, although I don't like the word, but it's on them now to ensure that we will have a timely and successful energy transition. And why I'm saying this? Because lots of energy demand and increase in energy demand is coming from the developing part of the world, where you have young populations, you have increasing income levels, so there is where you expect a lot of consumer goods, energy demand in consumer goods demand to come from. Okay, so that also connects to the question of who should bear the burdens of this energy transformation. Is it the developing world, or is it the developed world that has to support this transition, this system transformation in the developing part of the world? Now, the third stream, the third part and large theme of my research connects too much with the energy, water, food and ecosystem nexus that is also a core issue in this conference. Again, when I was working in this research stream, although I started from water-energy interactions, it came real fast to the understanding that you cannot discuss about water management or energy sector management without understanding the interconnection. So again, the system perspective is very, very important when we're trying to deliver assessment or to deliver proposals to policymakers and businesses. Let me give you an example. Let's start with the case of water. When I was first approached to work on water as an economist, the question was, okay, let's start with the market for water and the simple economics of water. Like, is there a fair price for water? And is there a transparent price for water? The first question was whether water is a public or a private good. And it seems that water complies perfectly with all those requirements that make a good a private good. So it's rival in consumption and it's excludable. That means that if someone consumes water, no one else can consume it at the same time. And also, if I do something that deteriorates the quality of water, that has also impact on third parties. But despite the fact that it has these characteristics that can be qualified as a private good, at the end of the day, access to water is a human right, so you cannot really talk about prices that can reflect the total cost and benefits of water without considering the implications for access to water, okay, and human rights. So when we were trying as economists to discuss with other disciplines and policymakers about what should be done in order to rationalize water use in Europe, okay, the standard economic approach was let's see the pricing signals, let's see demand and supply interactions, and let's set a price that actually signals water scarcity issues to consumers. Okay, and we were doing this in the context of the South European countries. So most of us coming from the region, we were well aware of the problems, the limitations, and water scarcity and water pressures in the regions. Now, if you do a complete economic assessment in order to derive a transparent and an integrated market price for water, you need to consider the financial costs. So what does it take to have the distribution system in place to operate? You need to consider the environmental costs, so what happens when we consume water to other environmental users of water, and also the opportunity cost, so what is the next best use of this water. Now, if you try to include all these cost elements in water pricing, you may end up with a price that is too high for consumers, and especially for critical consumers that are also heavy consumers of water, like the agricultural sector. So a lot of the discussion here does not have to do with water prices per se, or the economic approach to water pricing, but it has to do with aspects of complexity of water management, and especially complexity that has to do with rights of access to water. So we go beyond economic analysis of water and we discuss much more the complexity that is inherent in water management that has to do with the definition of non-market values of water, with the long-term impacts of water use, because it doesn't really matter if you have high or low costs today. What it also matters in terms of sustainability is what will be left there for future generations. Technological innovation, how does that enter into water pricing and water management issues? Because right now we have technologies that can not only save water consumption and water use, but can also recycle water, repurpose water. So how do you integrate this technological innovation that enables us to use water forms that may not be used earlier on, but now technology is allowing for that? And of course, how in the end of the day consumers appreciate and accept these water treatment alternatives and water use alternatives. And this brought us to the concept of total cost recovery of water use. So how do you estimate not only the total economic costs and benefits of water, but also how do you integrate this in the market price, and how do you convince consumers in the end of the day that see this price to understand that what they pay is a fair and not just fair but also transparent cost of their behavior. And here is where problems become even more important, because it's quite easy to estimate the economic and the financial costs of water, but in terms of governance, things are much more complex, because water does not restrict in a specific geographic areas or within national boundaries, and it also has development implications. So socioeconomic and socio-environmental outcomes related to access to water. And of course, we connected all this, I referred to this already earlier, we connect all this with international and regional policy frameworks. So at the European Union, the European Water Framework Directive, at the international level, we connect this to specific SDGs that relate on water and water-related targets. And it's very good to see that for the first time, there is a clear indication, at least in the European Union, that economics should be an integral part of water management. But as economists, we were the first in the room to say that basically it's extremely difficult to include these non-monetary values of water in the final market pricing. And this also connects to the wider nexus, so water, energy, food, ecosystem nexus. We also connected this to the energy sector specifically. We talk too much about the energy transition, but energy transition has high implications about water availability and water use, and also it runs the other way around, because you can have energy improvements or energy solutions that can provide also water. Consider, for instance, desalination plants and renewable energy technologies that can be together. And here, again, a quick connection of all this water management and water economics discussion to creating a business, to creating a convincing business case. We had to make sure that business entities and all those parties that see increasing water prices need to understand what is, again, the cost of non-action. The cost of non-action is basically increasing water resources prices over time. When you have water scarcity, in the end of the day, what you end up with is having less water for your production. So whether they like it or not, they need to understand that they need to integrate cost-benefit analysis, integrated cost-benefit analysis of water use in their operations. And that means that you include not only the economic cost and the financial cost, but also the environmental, the social costs, and the opportunity cost that you have related to water use. And just to speed up, the last part of my research looks into inclusion and equity issues. And one may naturally say, like, why look at, let's say, gender implications or youth engagement implications of energy transition or even sustainability transition? I'll give you two examples that justify this system perspectives approach. First of all, our work in local content policies. What are local content policies? Are industrial policies that look at the linkages that can be created with the energy sector in specific, forward and backward linkages with the rest of the production sectors in an economy. For instance, you can have deployment of renewable energy technologies, and then you have policies in place that they are trying to improve the connection of renewable energy technology, renewable energies producers with suppliers from the local economy or from the regional markets. And the idea is that you strengthen the industrial base in an economy. What we did in this work is to assess the local content policies and the understanding in the scientific literature. And basically what we found is that we continue to discuss local content policies in isolation. So we discuss them only as industrial policies, while in essence they can be sustainability transition policies. They can be policies that, if designed to look for interconnections between the industrial level development and targets to other SDGs, whether it's equity, whether it's access to decent work, whether it's regional cooperation, then indeed these industrial policies can also be supportive to sustainability transition. And one of the most recent works connects youth engagement to inclusion and institutions in place that move this sustainability transition. This is the only numerical example that I give from our work, but basically what I want you to concentrate on is the interrelationship between knowledge, between understanding the problem, that is climate change and climate change readiness and actions to risk, with preparedness, so how well prepared societies and communities are to address any risks associated to climate change. We ran this experiment in the island of Skiathos in Greece, that is an isolated and a highly exposed island to climate change impacts. And we were trying to understand whether the youth in the island felt well informed and well prepared for any risks associated to climate change. And what we found here is that indeed there is a knowledge action gap. So while the youth in the island is well informed of what climate change is, what can be the potential impacts or the potential hazards that they are exposed to in the island, when it comes to acting and to how well prepared they feel to act and to address any potential risks, we found that the preparedness level was identified very low, and one of the main mediators to improve this preparedness level was community engagement. So a short message from this work is that it doesn't really matter just to understand or to deliver the knowledge with regards to climate change or what you have to do if you have an extreme weather risk, whether it's fire, whether it's heavy rain, etc., and flooding. What it really matters is to have engagement in place, to have community engagement. So it's governance at a very local level that engages all different parties, that in the end of the day develops the sense of safety, but also the sense of when to act and how to act. So although we care too much about the knowledge action at the climate change level, we also need to understand what makes communities resilient and how you engage people. So it's a social sciences perspective and contribution to the sustainability transition. And to conclude, yes, system thinking matters because we have very well documented interactions between the different systems. I just referred to my own work and how this work links this and contributes to understanding this interaction, but there is a whole body of scientific literature out there that shows how the systems are interconnected. And just to conclude with a message that I also delivered in the beginning, that, and this goes mainly to the young researchers in this room, that the next generation of researchers need to move behind the silos. So beyond the silos. We understand very well our own disciplines, our own subfields of research, but we need to develop this understanding of what our field of research and our contributions connect to the wider system. Because at the end of the day, what we are trying to transform is a system. And with that, thank you very much. I'm very happy to present this.
Thanks very much for the interesting lecture with some vision hints. Professor Dujic wants to start the questions.
Well, the others prepared.
Some more.
Europe has a very ambitious climate policy, but it seems that its policy doesn't have good connections with innovative policy. The way, for example, solar panels were handled was probably not the best way. We had industry in Europe, and then we were outcompeted by others because things were not done in the best way. And now we are repeating the same thing with automotive industry. So why there is no connection between innovation policy and the climate policy? Because there is obviously a very strong linkage.
Thank you. I think this is the most heated debate right now in many rooms in Brussels, like why we are losing this battle, and especially in the innovation field. Now, the industrial policy has been quite well developed and in place in terms of directives when it comes to energy transition, but being part of an interconnected world, free trade world, European businesses benefited a lot from relocating their activities in Southeast Asia. And that was a good thing to do, basically, because they were capitalizing on the competitive advantage of lower production costs, labor costs in other parts of the world. What potentially we missed is the fact that the capital that has been saved from this relocation of activities should and ought to be invested again in probably innovation priorities. So one thing is that we need to understand that when we relocate, we save money, and those money should not be consumption, should be invested again in innovation. Unfortunately, Europe has not been very strong in attracting capital for innovation. We lag behind the US in this regard. And it has to do with the fragmentation and the many voices that we hear within the European Union on what direction we should take. I have two questions for the audience. It's open-end questions. First of all, whether we are happy to change the governance system in Europe. My own answer in this would be no. We have one of the best systems. It's still democratic enough. It may be slow, but it's democratic enough, and all people sit in the table and discuss. Can we improve the speed of taking decisions? Yes, this is something that can be improved. The second, that has to do with the innovation gap. Now we stand at a very critical point in history. Europe has been quite strong in supporting innovation, and especially delivering public money in support of innovation. And now what we have our major counterpart, US, reconsidering how much money to put in scientific collaboration between industry and businesses, academic institutions. Europe has been quite strong in that regard. We are reconsidering now because we are diverting a significant part of our budget in security issues and priorities. And this is where the critical point in time happens. Like, will Europe continue to invest in collaborations, in innovation taking place in academic institutions, in innovation taking place as a result of the collaboration between the academic ecosystem, the scientific ecosystem, and the business ecosystem? I don't have an answer for this. I have just a wishful thinking that I do hope that we will not divert from the initial road that we had, the initial road that was support in the ecosystems that allow for collaboration between the scientific community and the business community. Where we can do better is speed up and make the financial system more innovative and transparent. Because so far we had just public money driving innovation in Europe. Now it's time to attract private money. Thank you.
Okay, Professor Burgas. Just a small follow-up of the question forwarded to by Nevin. I would like to comment the fact that most of the economic rules are linear or nearly linear, but the environmental problems, issues are highly non-linear. So could this conflict between linearity and non-linearity could be another reason why we are there is a gap in innovation in Europe?
Okay. Do I get this right? Are the economists to blame?
Not to blame, but there's a difference.
Okay.
No blame, but we have to do something on the economic side.
Okay. This is something that I tell to my students and also my MBA students, that most of them are engineers. Economists don't make decisions. They don't take decisions. We inform, like any other discipline, policymakers. It's policymakers that make decisions. The problem is the time horizon. Economists and the analysis that we do consider, especially in the framework of the sustainability transition, consider also future generations. And we have been very clear, as other disciplines, that if we are moving on the same path, then we endanger the well-being of future generations. This is a clear message that comes from economists as well. The problem is that policymakers have a very different horizon, time horizon. They have a time horizon of 4 or 5 years, and they have to deliver results in 5 years, and they have to convince their electorate that their lives are being improved within 5 years time period. So this is where economists are not heard in reality, because what we are saying here, the system transformation, and actually this is in support of the engineering solutions that other disciplines give, require commitments and require actions that go well beyond the 5-year horizon that politicians have. So I'm not sure that we are opposing here each other. We are on the same side, but in the end of the day, who makes the decision has a different time horizon. For natural scientists, this extending time horizon is well understood. For engineers, you can deliver solutions that work within a 5-year framework. So I guess that's where the friction also results between engineers and economists.
Thank you.
Professor Marcos.
Thank you for very insightful presentation. My question will be related to the first contribution you presented of you and your team. It's about you highlighted the linkage between fossil fuel subsidies and female market labor. Okay, did you also propose any actionable strategy or actions which will, besides mitigation, the reform of fossil fuel subsidies will deliver also to improvement of market,
Yes.
of female labor market? And the second would be about magnitude of this linkage. Compared to other, I would say, traditional factors being part of influencing the subsidies, fossil fuel subsidies, like security of supply, like affordability, like industrial competitiveness. How big is this linkage to the female market? And because it is very important to inform policy makers when designing the fossil fuel subsidies report.
Thank you. Well, I'll share with you an insight. This has been one of the most challenging works to present, and we started presenting it first in conferences in Middle East and North Africa. And the reactions we would get from people in the audience were so it was like, okay, you propose, you remove the subsidies, so what is going to happen to households and what we will do with these women that you want to enter them in the labor market? And we said that no, what we're saying is repurpose. Remove subsidies from oil and gas and provide enough financing and support for childcare services, for education of women, for equal access to the labor market. So yes, we have concrete recommendations on how you can repurpose this money. So we're not saying eliminate them and don't consider at all the cost of access to energy, affordability, etc. What we're saying is that you have energy policies that meaningfully impact on the decisions of the household on how to allocate time between paid work and non-paid work. And because we find a direct link with female employment, we say that basically you have to repurpose this money, this spending, into activities that enable women to get out of the market and to get out of the household, and then basically to capitalize on this 50% of the population that could be productive contribution to the labor market. That was one thing. So yes, the answer is we provide recommendations, policy recommendations on repurposing subsidies. The second, with the magnitude, we find statistically significant and also economically significant impact. I don't remember the exact number of the coefficient, but it's about something like 10-15%. So it's economically significant. It's not something that is not insignificant. But I refrain to check the number, the exact number, and revert with the number on that. Thank you.
One last question, Professor Kajic.
Yes, thank you for a very nice presentation and the answers. So I will just try to reform the question of Professor Tilkish. So it was never about the technology, it was always about economy and society. And I have really problem with these both scientific disciplines, if I can call them like this, because they are driven by the, let's say, artificial laws. So you can obey them or you cannot obey them, or you can even, let's say, be on the other side and try to not follow the rules and everything. So what is the really connection between the real world, like natural resources, and economical resources? Because if we convert our let's say resources to some kind of money, and then we start printing money, and when the system will react, and how we can stop this, or is it present, or what is the consequences, or can we deal with it, or this is something that I
Thank you.
see.
Thank you. I will start my answer with a comment. I think that it's the right way to put it is not, it was never about the technology. The right way to put it is, it's always about the technology, because even if we didn't have technological innovation, technological solutions, we would be faced with the sustainability issues much earlier in our time history, because it was always the technology that enabled societies to fulfill their needs within a system of limited resources. So technology is very important, and it drives, it delivers solutions in a way that societies continue to operate and continue to prosper. Now, the question about how do you connect a natural system with an artificial system. I'm not sure whether this system that we are discussing is artificial. What we are doing is just trying to understand what the rules shape human interactions. So what we study is real. People respond to information they receive, and people make decisions based on the information that they receive. So what we have to do, and what we are trying to do as economists that care about these issues, is to improve the decision-making system. So basically to give all the information, the concrete and full information that is coming from natural systems, to human beings that make decisions. And to a great extent we have delivered it. The problem is that in some aspects it's very costly to derive this information. For instance, it's extremely costly, and it differs from policy side to policy side, to understand how much people would be happy to pay to have access, let's say, to clean waters. Like we are in Burgas here, we have nice, there is a nice beach. So it's extremely difficult to understand how much residents in Burgas would be happy to pay to maintain that clean sea, and whether that level of willingness to pay compares to people in Athens, where I live, to have access to clean waters. So these kind of differentials make it extremely expensive as an exercise for the society to understand the true costs of having a good quality ecosystem out there. But we've done quite progress there. So with appropriate assumptions, we can identify willingness to pay in Burgas and then adjust it to the Athenian case. Thank you.
All right.